Good evening. It's 6:30. We have a full house. I want to thank everyone for coming to the Village of Corrales Governing Body Regular Meeting for October 12th, 2021 at 6:30. I've called the meeting to order, and now we should stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Now going to take the roll of the counselors. Counselor Lucero.
Here.
Counselor Knight.
Here.
Counselor Parker.
Here.
Counselor Burkett.
Here.
Counselor Murray.
Here.
Counselor Waldman.
Here.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item C, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Counselor Waldman. Do I have a second? Thank you, Counselor Murray.
Mayor, may I also, I'd like to amend the agenda.
Yes.
I'd like to pull item K, the confirmation of appointments, only because 3 of the 5 have no information whatsoever. And I don't even know if the persons who are reapplying want to have that position, but I'd like to see some more information given to me on those appointment sheets that we received.
Okay, and let me just ask for information. These are all people who are on the Parks and Recreation at the moment. So I will have Aaron go ahead and get their resumes for you, but I assure you they've all been volunteering for the village for years. So,
Well, Mayor, I would argue that there needs to be a little bit of change on that, because I would like to see signatures, and I also would like to see the dates and their terms of expiration. That's just my appointment right now. I don't know if anybody's second the motion, but it could either die standing or it can be confirmed.
I'll second.
all right, Counselor Waldman's going to second that. So we're going to remove confirmation of appointments. I would like to remind everybody on the council that these are volunteers who give their time, and that generally it is, I understand if there was some information lacking, but I wouldn't want citizens who have been volunteering to do this kind of work. It is not easy to find people who really want to do this work and have done it. So I wouldn't want anyone to take this as some suggestion that they are not worthy appointments.
No,
So with that change, I will
Mayor,
allow.
I'm not arguing that it's that point.
Okay.
And I would apologize to Mr. Cole and Mr. Correa, because they did fill out the sheets and I did see and read what they wrote. But the other 3 applicants, I have no idea if they actually filled it out.
All right,
No.
thank you. Well, with that change as amended, can we approve the agenda?
Yep.
All in favor? I'm going to ask Zachary Burkett,
Aye.
Stuart Murray,
Aye.
William Waldman,
Aye.
Kevin Lucero,
Aye.
Mel Knight,
Aye.
Tyson Parker.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move into our administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor. The first thing I'd like to do is go to Tanya for a COVID update, please.
Good morning or good evening, Council, Mayor, and Administrator Curry. I'm sorry, I am in my car, so I'm going to control my bandwidth and not do video. I just got done with a vaccine clinic and was racing to get to a computer. And yes, it is windy. I am windblown. We've been outside all day vaccinating. COVID cases in Corrales, we got 3 more today. So that was 3 over a 4-day weekend, which is good. However, our numbers and the state numbers have always been low on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday tend to be our high ones. We've had 24 total COVID cases in Corrales for the month of October. We are now at 467 cases. I did not look up the hospital numbers yet, but I'm sure they're going up just from the physicians that I've been talking to. They do a lot of releases over the weekend, so we'll see what it looks like on Wednesday. That tends to be our big day. doing a lot of vaccinating, still getting a few first timers. Out of 63 vaccines today, we got one first timer, which was nice. One of the clinics was purely a first responder staff kind of vaccine day, so we didn't expect any first timers there, but it was open for them. Tomorrow we're running over 300 vaccines in the village, which is really, really good. We've got our daytime large site partner with New Mexico Department of Health again, and that runs from 1 to 4:30, and then we have our normal evening site from 5:30 to 7. We got to kind of go back because of the sunsets coming earlier, and I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Have any questions for Commander Latin? All right, I don't see any, so we're going to move up to the administrator's report.
Okay, next thing I'd like to is ask Michael Chavez to report on crosswalks of all types that he's aware of right now and an update on their status.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors, Administrator Curry. So as you know, I've been working with the DOT on our crosswalks. And starting from the south end of Cabezon, that one is done. We have a slight realignment. We moved the west end, giving a little more room for pedestrians to go through. Via Oriada, we put that back to its original location. Metal Arc, we did a little realignment on that. We moved it to the south to get it out of the business driveway. We still have a little work on that to remove the curb for access. The one on Jones Road, we moved that to Priestley. On that one, we originally, it was calling for one at Coronado, Corowal, and Jones. So we consolidated all into one at Priestley. That way they can access the growers market. The one in administration stayed the same. Dixon Road is one that they were gonna eliminate because it's not on our pedestrian plan, but we got them to go ahead and put that one in. The one at Kings Road, we left it there, but we also made it pedestrian and equestrian. We removed the one on Rome because of the new roadway and parking area. There's a lot of vehicles driving on that. Corrales del Norte, we left that original. We also left the 2 school crosswalks, of course. We had to leave those there. We're not done yet. We have to add these 3 to our pedestrian plan along with Dixon Road. We need East Ella on there, Baraquita Road, and Rome Lane. And once we get our plan cleared up, they'll go ahead and install those 3. And that's pretty much where we sit right now with them. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions regarding the crosswalks for Michael Chavez? All right, I don't see any. I was going to ask you, Michael, would you explain about how the signage is going to work for the crosswalks?
They've already moved most of the signage.
Okay,
They came in, they started last week, and they must have finished yesterday because this morning they were all done.
great. Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work you've done to get this accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Woolman.
Yeah, just a quick question, Michael. We had talked several months ago on the crosswalks about the possibility of putting in some higher signs and buttons for horses, people on horses. Is that still under discussion?
I'll bring that up to them now. The main thing was try to get the location set. And like we were talking about one on Cabezon. But right now with the project we're starting for the repaving of it and the realignment and the pathway, I'd kind of like to hold off on that one.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and bring up like Via Oriada to them and see what we can do there.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Mr. Curry.
Next thing we have on my agenda is a report on the Harvey Jones channel, and I'm waiting to see if Chuck Thomas is on the line. There he
Here
is.
he is.
Chuck, it's all yours.
Thank you, Administrator Curry, Mayor Roque, councilors. Just wanted to kind of give you an update of where we're at on the project. So we did have a bid opening on September 21st. So we were hoping everything would kind of come in about where we expected with the cost. And of course, with I think with all the supply chain disruption and everything else, we were unpleasantly surprised with the bid. So we had an engineer's estimate of $369,000 roughly, and our low bid came in at $661,000, and our second bid came in at $799,000 roughly. So double the price of what we were expecting out of the project. I think there were a number of factors, obviously, kind of the COVID supply chain disruption. It was a kind of multidisciplinary project, and we only had a couple of bidders, so I think there wasn't a lot of impetus to really kind of sharpen their pencils. So that did set us back a little bit. We didn't have the funding package organized to handle either one of those bids, so we rejected both bids. However, the project is moving forward. What we've decided to do is we've broken up the project kind of along some unit processes. So we're going to handle the siphon work and the earth moving work with our work crew and with a couple of our on-call contractors to handle that work. So we're negotiating costs, scopes of work and costs for those two elements of the project. We expect to get started clearing and grubbing kind of the area, kind of knocking down the brush the week of October 18th. So we'll be meeting with Sarah Hertow out on site to just kind of identify the trees that we want to make sure and not damage, and then identifying all the other materials to kind of be removed out there. So she'll be working with us very closely so that we can make sure that those trees are clearly marked to save as part of the project. And this is something we would have done with the contractor had we been able to get one on board. So we're kind of stepping through the same procedures with the project. So we're going to take that week to kind of get things kind of cleared up, and then we'll start the earth moving process the week of October 25th. And we hope to have that finished up just the week before Thanksgiving. So I think it's the week ending on the 19th of November. So we'll get that, the week ending on the 19th. So we'll get that done. Kind of simultaneously, we will be taking the original bid package and we'll be removing the siphon, removing that earthwork that we're working on. And we're going to rebid the package starting on October 25th. So now that we're reducing the project essentially down to moving the sanitary sewer line discharge point from where it is to the north as originally planned, hopefully those bids will come in much more competitively within the price range that we're expecting to see that, by simplifying this project. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We expect to be able to complete the project with the original timeline and get it cleared up this winter by late December, early January, and then be ready for planting in February, which I know Sarah Hertow was saying that's kind of an ideal time frame to go ahead and start the plantings in February so that they're ready for spring. So I think we had a little bit of a hiccup, kind of a bump in the road, but we were able to kind of move things around and keep it on track. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Do I have questions from the counselors for Chuck Thomas? Yes, Counselor Murray.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, what's plan B if the bids come in way too high again?
Well, I think for that one, we're definitely going to be hopeful that the bids will come in, at a much more competitive price. I think we've discussed that option with the City of Rio Rancho, with their utility director. And so he's aware of the chance that it may come in a little bit higher. And he has set aside some additional funding to ensure that this project gets done. Obviously, if it comes in double or something like that, we may have to kind of reset and, step back and come up with an alternate plan. But for right now, if there's some, small variation or increase in price, probably 25% range or something like that, I think we'll be able to handle it because, we understand that that's already happened once. So there's a good chance it can happen again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming. Mr. Curry?
Welcome.
Chuck, I just wanted to know, I know you've got a basic drawing that you might explain to some of the counselors as to just a quick overview of the project? Are you able to show that, or is Aaron able to show that?
Yeah, I sent that to Aaron. Yeah, this is the kind of the project area, and let me see if I can start the annotation process here. If it'll let me.
Aaron, I think you have to let people annotate. It's not showing up.
I haven't ever done that. There we go. Let's see. I can see that I can annotate. I don't know. I set it so that anyone should be able to annotate. Chuck, are you having an issue doing anything?
Yeah, let me see if it'll kick in here. Sometimes Zoom gets a little twitchy.
Because if all else, you can share your screen with the picture, and then you should be able to annotate if that's how you want to go about it.
Okay. So yeah, because it's not giving me a shot at it. Let me go ahead and try to pull it up. Hold on, I'll have to open that file real quick.
The reason why I ask is because there's been a great deal of effort, a lot of collaboration going through on this project now, working with myself and Chief Martinez, along with the folks in Rio Rancho and SCAFTA, and of course the Conservancy District. And I would say hundreds of hours at least of conversation, collaboration on it. And we're looking forward to a project that's going to really improve the area down there for not only from the folks here in Corrales, but also in the way that the flows go into the river coming from Rio Rancho.
Right, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up the presentation that Sarah had kind of run through on top of that photo. So that photo is just kind of to kind of show you the area, and then this way we can there. So you should be able to see that draft of the area. So looking at the screen right here we go. Here's my annotation. Now I can scribble all over it. You know, here's the siphon kind of running through here in this area. So right at this location within the siphon is where we're looking at dropping that down a few feet so that we can establish a flow path for the water coming out of the Harvey Jones channel and dry up that little pond that had been down at the bottom right there. So I think we were able to get some of that work completed when we did the channel modification, but with the siphon sitting at the grade that it was, we couldn't quite finish it out until we go ahead and lower that piece right there. So once we get that taken care of, you can see the idea will be as the flow comes in from the Harvey Jones, it'll split. The majority of the flow will trend in this direction on the high flow events with that, and then there'll be a little bit of overflow that kind of comes down into here from that direction. And that's where it'll combine with the sanitary sewer overflow water. So all that water will be coming in from this direction right here. That will be providing kind of the vast majority of the steady state flow, which will help support the plant growth. And then as you can kind of see down here, the idea is to get that water to spread out. Currently, if you've been down there, you've seen where that sanitary sewer discharge point has kind of created an incised channel that kind of just pulls into the Rio Grande at that location. What we're hoping to do here is push that grade out, put some hardened features, some boulders and whatnot in here to keep that flow from creating that same type of incised channel so that we can keep it moving and spreading out amongst the bosque and getting as much of that infiltrate as possible right there at the bank of the Rio Grande and help support that vegetation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any questions based on, from the counselors, based on this plan? Right, I don't see anyone, so thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
You're very welcome.
Mayor,
Um,
the last thing that I have on my report before I turn it back to you is somewhat personal in nature and also from the village, is that during this last week's balloon fiesta, the village of Corrales was celebrated many times during the pilot briefing and on the air for the cooperation that the village showed, and the residents of the village especially showed, and having the balloons come in to the village. I know a lot of residents placed white X's on their property. We had none, any landowner reports that caused any disruption here. But the village of Corrales is such an important element for the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. And one of the things that was demonstrated to me is one of the awards that's given every day is landowner award, where the balloonists who land in various places around our community go back and submit a landowner's name to be drawn out of a hat randomly for their help and respect that they gave the balloons, and vice versa for landing on their property. And every day that the balloons came over in this direction, there were literally dozens of folks whose names were submitted for being landowner of the day during the balloon fiesta. So I just wanted to tell you, as a balloonist and a resident of Corrales, not only how important the village is for the balloon fiesta, but how appreciative the balloon fiesta is to the village of Corrales. So thank you all very much from me personally, and good job, Corrales. Back to you, Mayor.
all right. Well, as many of you may know, our clerk, Aaron Hewlin, will be, his last day of work here in the village is Friday, October 15th. So here's a proclamation for you, Aaron. The tone may be a little tongue-in-cheek, but we're very sincere in how we feel about you. Whereas Aaron joined the village as a lifeguard at the tender age of 15, because he was a bona fide pool rat with a desire to have some fun, do some good, and earn some summertime money. And whereas Aaron was a quick study, learning from Parks and Recreation Director Lynn Sieverts, even though he did manage to hook Lynn in the ear while Lynn was teaching him how to fly fish. And whereas Aaron has worked for the village in many positions, including lifeguard, head guard, specialist at Parks and Recreation, sort of a stint as deputy clerk, and now village clerk. And whereas Aaron has brought to each position a desire to serve and a work ethic that we all should strive to model. And whereas Aaron stepped into the clerk position at the beginning of COVID with his IT knowledge as the village was learning how to operate remotely with Zoom. And whereas Aaron was an instant team player by listening and sharing his depth of knowledge about the village operations, village history, and village people with all village staff, including finance, legal, and the village administration. And whereas Aaron brought direct honesty and positive efficiencies to and for the village and the village staff with his can-do and will-do attitude. And whereas Aaron has been accepted into the University of New Mexico PhD medical program and will be leaving the village after 9 years of service in all of his different capacities. Therefore, I, Joanne D. Roque, Mayor of the Village of Corrales, do hereby proclaim Friday, October 15th, 2021, Aaron Hewlin Day in the Village of Corrales, and encourage all citizens and non-citizens to join in this most worthy observance. Here's to you, Aaron. Your ears will probably never recover from all the Zooming. I don't.
Well, I don't have my camera on, but I have a big smile on my face, so thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. The next item is the Counselors Forum, and this section is for information purposes only, not for discussion and debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session.
Yep.
Councilor Lucero? You're muted. Muted.
Thought I did that. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to give a quick shout out
to Michael Chavez and his public works crew for their diligent work always to this community. I just want to just explain an incident that happened here in my district. A couple weeks back, late on a weekend, I was notified that somehow the Angel Road sign went missing. Like I said, it was late on a weekend and didn't really have much to call, but before I could address it, I found that I passed by and I saw the public works crew replacing that Angel Road sign. And I know those signs aren't easy to come by. And I know that there had to be some work that got put into it. The reason it was so important is because there's some citizens on Angel Road that require healthcare on a daily basis. And that road sign is very important to make sure that people can get to their house in a expeditious manner sometimes that's necessary. So the fact that the sign was put back so quickly didn't go unnoticed. And Michael Chavez, that gratitude is directed to you and your crew. Furthermore, I would be remiss, and I believe because her name came up a couple of times, and it's no surprise that anything good in this village could be Commander Latin had to be part of it. So Commander Latin, I do know you, I believe you did have a role in this also. So thank you very much to you and Michael Chavez and your crew. Thank you very much. That I appreciate that attention to detail that you all always put to your projects and to this village. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. All right, I'm looking around. I don't see anyone else. So Aaron, who do we have for the Coreylanes Forum tonight?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I did have one person sign up and then one letter submitted. So we'll start with the public comment. Mr. Flora, whenever you're ready, go ahead and unmute and you'll have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, councilors, my name is Kurt Flora. You all know who I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I would like to be put on the next agenda, 10, 26, 21. Since I couldn't be able to be put on their last council meeting, I asked to be put on the next agenda. I would like to speak about some issues in the village concerning the ordinances in the next on the next agenda. Specifically ordinances 1877, 1880, 1881, 1882, 1886, 1887, 1891. And 1893. All these ordinances, I'm sure you're aware of, they've all been issues since our beginning of this fighting the corruption here in Corrales and the village planning and zoning not obeying by their own ordinances. It's been a 4-year battle. We're still battling you. And we will continue to do that. I also would like to bring up, I did happen to listen to the September 16th meeting. It was a special council meeting and with Mr. DeHaas there, and his due process rights being violated in that meeting, and also what he said about Lori's demeanor about her telling people to go fuck themselves. Excuse my language there, but that's the language that we are hearing from her. I do have it on recording on one of my recordings of Lori. I have many recordings with Lori, and it's point blank on that recording. I have tried to do everything I can to let the public know the corruption that has been going on, and this is just years and years of it. And yes, we are scheduled to be going to a court of appeals real soon here, but I just want to talk about the ordinances that you guys are refusing to obey before we hit that court of appeals session there. So if I can be put on the next agenda 1026 to 21, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Haflora. Aaron, shall we move on to the letter that's being read into the record?
Yes, Madam Mayor, this letter is from George Wright, the former District 2 counselor, and it reads, to protect Corrales residents from the dire consequences of neighborhood codification, Councilor Clauser and I co-sponsored and spent many months coordinating Ordinance 18-002 through 4 associated resolutions and multiple refinements to converge on and pass an acceptable solution to pot restrictions in A1 and A2 zones. We anticipated that forthcoming statewide cannabis legalization was in the offing, but 18-002 was good law, and we were confident that it would protect residents well into the future. What we did not anticipate was that those protections would be capriciously unwound due in large measure to specious attorneys and administrative inputs. I urge the council to fix this by restoring zoning restrictions. They should start by introducing and approving publish and post legislation in the next regularly scheduled council meeting on 10/26 of 2021. Time is of the essence given the immediacy of licensing timelines under the Cannabis Regulation Act. So councilors should require a subsequent special legislative session as soon as possible after the 10/26 meeting, consistent with ordinance publication timelines to discuss, debate, and finalize the legislation. It is incumbent upon councilors to protect livability and quality of life for all residents. While the state statute implies that cannabis is a natural agricultural plant, it does not give carte blanche to unleash commercial facilities in residential areas. Per village code, the village must, quote, promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents of the village by controlling the use of land so that it is developed in harmony with existing uses, end quote. And the Cannabis Regulation Act provides that, quote, the local jurisdiction can limit density of licenses and operating times consistent with neighborhood uses, end quote. It is well established that there were, at the time of codification of Ordinance 18-002 and are now ample acreages exclusive of A1 and A2 to accommodate commercial cannabis operations. We can and should restrict pot production while at the same time preserving state statutes provision for growth of a few cannabis plants for personal use. George Wright. And that's all I have for the Coreylanes Forum tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the village council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councilor Burkett. Any discussion? All right, then I'm going to ask for a vote on these two items, please. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The items on the consent agenda have been passed. We're now going to move to, there's nothing on, so we're going to move on to old business. The first item is the consideration, action, and approval of the motion to complete the record of the 66 Bad Coyote Place denied building permit appeal heard on September 16th, 2021. Randy, we may need to talk about 1 and 2. We'll give a little preface to both, but could you explain what item 1 is, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor and councilors, when I was preparing the findings of fact and conclusions of law for that case, came to my attention that the topics that were the primary focus of the discussion in the hearing, the application for a building permit and the permit itself that was issued were not made part of the record at that hearing. So this is simply a motion to complete that record by making those a part of the record. Aaron, it was my understanding that Mr. DeHoff didn't specifically object to those being added to the record. Is that correct?
That's correct, Randy.
So, and he would be able to respond tonight if he so chose. And the only alternative to do that, I think, would be to set another public hearing on it, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because, as I said, they were part and parcel of the original hearing. And it will complete the record in case this case is appealed. The district court will then see the whole story rather than wonder about what the application and the permit look like, and probably remand to you anyway. So that's the motion.
Thank you. Do any of the counselors have a question for Mr. Audio about this? All right, thank you then. Do I have a motion on item number 1?
Mayor, I move that we approve item number 1.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I got both one from Counselor Waldman and Counselor Knight, but I was looking at Counselor Knight, so she gets to second that motion. And then I'm going to ask for a voice vote. I'm going to do a roll call. Counselor Parker,
Yes.
Counselor Knight,
Aye.
Counselor Lucero,
Aye.
Counselor Burkett,
Yep.
Counselor Murray,
Aye.
Counselor Waldman.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. All right, now we're going to move on to the second item, which is related, which is the consideration, action, and approval of findings of fact and conclusions of appeal hearing for a denied building permit at 66 Bad Coyote Place. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Counselor Murray. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Counselor Burkett. All right, is there any discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to take a vote on this. Counselor Lucero,
And I'm going to recuse myself from this vote because I was unable to attend that hearing.
thank you, Counselor. Counselor Knight,
Aye.
Counselor Parker,
Aye.
Counselor Burkett,
Aye.
Counselor Murray,
Aye.
Counselor Waldman.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, we're now going to move on to a presentation from Mr. Cog of the first section of Chapter 18 Steering Committee work. As you all know, the village has engaged Mr. Cog and also has the hard work of the steering committee and all the members of the planning and zoning, and Lori Stout as the planning and zoning administrator, and they have been working hard to clarify the various sections of our land use ordinance, Chapter 18, and they are here tonight sort of with a big chunk. So Bianca, Bianca, are you going to present this? This is our new person at COG. So greetings, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Mayor, member of the governing body. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Of course.
I'm not necessarily new to Mr. Cog, but I am new to the regional planning program. I'm the new regional planning program manager for Mr. Cog.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Kind of coming in at the tail end of this project, but Peyton's done a fantastic job of catching me up. So I think what we'll do is we'll just walk through some of the more significant changes in the document for the benefit of the members of the public that are here. I know the members of the governing body did receive a memo, but just as a sort of refresher, I think what we'll do is walk through, maybe Peyton could screen share the document as we just kind of roll through it. And then if you'll just jot down any questions or comments, and then we can talk about them at the end. I do have a few sort of questions for the council, so just maybe keep those in mind as well.
All right.
Let's see. Peyton, are you able to pull that up? Aha. Great. Thank you. Okay, so just from the top, we moved this section that was administration and enforcement from section 1846 into section 2. There's some language here that has to do with the administrator being appointed by the mayor, which apparently is not how it works, so we modified that language. This was sort of the first question for the council, which is related to the authority of the building inspector and the zoning administrator to enter buildings with 24 hours of notice without consent of the property owner. I'm not exactly sure what the legality of this is, and maybe your counsel who's here tonight could give us some advice on that. One question that we had just sort of getting started was we had initially replaced governing body with village council, and we defined village council. But then in the chapter 2, where the authority of the village council is sort of set out, you're all referred to as the governing body. So maybe they're interchangeable, maybe you have a preference. As it stands right now, we have a definition for both governing body and village council, and they just sort of reflect each other. So in general, most of the definitions were modified just to clarify. There weren't really significant changes made to many of them. And I'll just sort of talk through some of those changes that we made. So the abandoned building definition was modified to include a 12-month timeline for determining the abandoned status. This was based on some feedback from the Planning and Zoning Commission that we had last week. One of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners, I would say very smartly, noticed that the definition of agriculture was specific to soil. And he expressed some concern about aquaponics, especially with this new cannabis law coming into place. So we just removed the soil part from it and just left it as, so it would pertain to aquaponics as well. There was some talk about this attached definition, and the Planning and Zoning Commission was concerned that when we defined attached, that we weren't specifically saying attached structures. And that if we used attached in any other context, it would be confusing. So we modified it to include the word structures, but then we did a search of the document and the word attached is not used anywhere in the document. My understanding is that you're sort of trying to get ahead of some of these recent more stringent regulations on casitas. And this was sort of a way that maybe you could do that. And I have some other suggestions maybe to do that, and maybe we could eliminate attached. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. The bed and breakfast definition was modified to eliminate the provisions for having a bed and breakfast in an accessory dwelling unit. One of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners was a little bit confused about the language in here about food being served, and if it's served to overnight guests, if they can have guests that aren't overnight. I think the intention is that they couldn't have a restaurant, but maybe they thought that the other would be true. I'll leave that at the pleasure of the village council. If you deem it fit to be modified, then we're happy to take that on. Just sort of getting the cannabis definitions were all added based on your recent ordinance that was passed. Peyton has gone through and sort of highlighted all of the cannabis things because I understand that it's still a work in progress. So we can sort of easily, take these out and modify them as necessary with the final approved ordinance. So sort of getting back to the definitions and how they can help you sort of really enforce the casitas and not having casitas, if you will. One of my suggestions is to modify the dwelling unit definition to make it so that each dwelling unit can only have 1 meter per utility, which could help, and that all rooms are accessible from an inside door. And sort of related to that, I know that the kitchen definition was modified. And I am recommending that maybe you add a definition for a second kitchen, just because state statute does specifically have provisions for multi-generational housing. And one of the suggestion in the state statute is to allow for a secondary kitchen. And I think with that second kitchen definition, you could also attach that it's on the primary dwelling unit under a single meter or something like that, so that you could make sure that people aren't having a whole full and separate kitchen in a full and separate dwelling unit. Okay, let's see. So I did the lot definition currently has some language about platted lots. And we're working on the non-conforming lot section now, which will be in the second part of this presentation. But just something to keep in mind, you know, I think that there's some issue with these MRGCD tracks, and we don't really know how to treat them yet. And so the lot specifically says platted. So just something to keep in mind as we work through the non-conforming section, that we need to modify this according to what that says.
Right, I have that.
So we added definitions for non-conforming lot structure and use as part of what we did, the work we've done so far with the non-conforming section, where we just kind of parceled all of these things out so that the regulations aren't the same for all of them, but without really changing the rules necessarily, which is kind of what we were tasked with. Setbacks have all been moved to the setback section. So now you have setback front, setback rear, setback side, just to make it a little bit more clear. The definitions for roadway and street were separated to just show that there is a difference between those two things. So I think that's probably it for the definition section. Obviously, if you have any other comments for us on that section, please do let us know. Okay, so moving on to 1830. Some changes were made. I think most of the changes that were made in this section have to do with just updating to the most recent regulations of the state and the village. Standard driveway access was modified. I believe that was the recommendation of the fire chief. There's some information about requirements for addressing that was added. Some language that was added for portable restroom facilities to be only allowed on a temporary basis. The clear site triangle is now defined and diagrams are added for clarity. The lot width requirements were added, and my understanding is that this was done because there was different sort of interpretations of the lot width requirement. And it really is just to make sure that all lots have access. Let's see, the fences section added some fence regulations along Corrales Road, and some standards were created for fences over 4 feet. And I believe that's all I have for this section. And then really in terms of the individual zoning districts, really not much was changed. All we really did was move some things around to make them clear. We set them up so that the order was always the same. And then we really sort of allowed for some more zoning interpretation so that every single use did not have to be listed individually, and that Lori or the members of this council could have some leeway to say that, you know, a salon is the same as a barber shop, and those types of things. All of the permitting information was moved out of the individual sections and into a permit section. An allowance was added for temporary mobile homes to be used as primary dwelling units during construction. And then once again, the cannabis language was incorporated into each of the appropriate zoning districts. We added group homes with 5 or less people into a permissive use. And that's really based on fair housing. The definition of family says up to 5 unrelated people. So this was just added that any group home with 5 people or less is a permissive use. And then in the uses by review, we will add, and I'm not sure it's in the copy that went to council, but we will add that group homes that are state licensed or state operated are by state law allowed in any zoning district up to 10 people. And so in the same way that churches are allowed in any zoning district, but they are a use by review, so you can have some control over parking and things of that nature. So we put them in the use by review section. So Just a few questions for council in the last minute or two. So first of all, currently the senior living facilities has some pretty strict language that requires very large amounts of land that the steering committee for this project didn't seem to think was even available in the village. So the question is does this need to come out? Like, does this just not even need to be a use by review, like just not allowed? Or does the restriction that requires, I think it's 15 acres or something, should that just be modified? That's a little bit beyond the scope of what we were tasked to do. So that's really up to council. I did want to recommend that sections 1811 through 1814 and 1821 through 1823, which establish the powers of the Planning and Zoning Commission, be moved, and the Capital Improvements Committee be moved into Chapter 2. And the reason that I think that is, I think the Planning and Zoning Commission authority needs to be established prior to Chapter 18 because they also regulate signs, which is in a different chapter. Okay. So just a couple things I think were in a memo that maybe you saw, but the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend modifying the rules for short-term rentals, reducing the number of allowable bedrooms from 6 to 4 bedrooms. And then another commissioner had suggested adding a provision that properties be required to retrofit for stormwater retention to the current standards. The chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission didn't think it was legal to make people retrofit their properties for stormwater. And I don't really know the answer to that. So it was based on, I think in the lighting section, it says light fixtures that go out of commission have to be replaced with light fixtures that meet the code. And so I think his thought was that if we could do that with lights, we can do that with stormwater, but there's really not a device that breaks that you would have to replace. So just some thoughts from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I think that's it for us. So I'll stand for questions.
Bianca, you said you had some ideas about the word attached. Would you like to share those?
My suggestion was really that attached could come out because attached isn't used in any way, and that the way that you would sort of regulate, or what maybe the intention of using attached could be regulated more through the definition of dwelling unit. But I mean, obviously the definition can stay. It's just not necessarily related to anything in the document currently.
Okay. Counselors, questions for Ms. Borg? Counselor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, and yeah, so there are some definitions that probably should be either inserted and or changed a little bit, but do you want us to send them to you for inclusion, or do you want to discuss them here?
Well, I suppose that's up to you all. Because I don't know that like a single member of the council suggesting an added definition, or if that's something that you would rather discuss as a group.
Well, okay, well, let me just run down the list that I have right now. In 1829, under dwelling unit, we have it's been struck out designated for one family, but I think that should be left in. And I'm a little worried also about the way you are indicating that we can only have one power meter to prevent short-term rentals or other units. Most of these places only have one power meter, and the accessory building or the short-term rental comes off of that. So that bothers me a little bit that we might try to approach it that way. On landscaping, let's see. I think we had a minimum of 30% coverage at maturity of live plant materials shall be included in the areas required. We probably need to add that, I think. Also, in slopes, we need to make sure that slopes over 15% shall remain undisturbed as well. And also, The open fencing, I guess we can talk about that in the future, because I think Councilor Burkett wants to, one of these days, we're going to get a fencing ordinance, somewhere, someplace. Also,
Well, I think you're looking at it. I think you're looking at what he's proposed and.
is that it?
Yes, that's it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Alrighty.
And again, maybe, and I know you'll be finishing up your list, but again, I think maybe a good idea in order for everybody to have the time to really think about it would be your original suggestion, Councilor Murray, would be to submit in writing to the COG and the steering committee, and then we can, then they can really give it a good once over, I think. And I think that would probably be the fairest way.
There were some items that you kind of, she never mentioned, that I kind of got a little bit disturbed about. Especially under 1828 application of article number A, you've scratched out everything and more or less given the planning and zoning administrator carte blanche for interpretation of the zone mapping. I'm a little concerned about that area too. Also, under 1830, under 1830, I believe it is, items L and M. Some of this, there are some reasons why we had that in there. And part of it has to do with the history of the village, more or less. Also, the lot coverage, I'm a little bit, the lot design or lot definition. It was a complicated process. I understand that, because when I was on planning and zoning, and we tried to work this out, but Corrales has some unique lot features, and not all of them fit the box like a rectangle or a square. And that's why it was complicated the way Bob Borman set it up. But it was to take into account these irregular lots that we have. I think going to 85% means that you could have a lot that would be maybe 65 or 70 feet wide instead of 75 feet for an A1 coverage. And if it went far enough back, it would meet the lot coverage by your definition. I'm a little concerned about that. Maybe we need to discuss that. And maybe a work study would be better, better served when we get all these changes, because I think we're gonna have to have some negotiation between this, because if it just shows up as an ordinance with all these changes, we're gonna miss something sooner or later. And I think that is basically my list of items. But medical cannabis. I think we also need a definition for that based on the Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Act, just for inclusion.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Murray. Does any of the other councilors? Yes, Councilor Waltman.
Yes, a question about the senior living facility. You go into detail about what can be included, and at the very end, you say it may optionally include independent living. There has been discussion in the village, and we haven't discussed it fully in council, about the possibility of a senior living facility which is solely independent living, without the need for skilled nursing or assisted living, et cetera. So I'm concerned that this becomes set in stone without the ability for consideration later on, full discussion on independent living.
Thank you. Any of the other councilors? Yes, Councilor Burkett.
Just on the fences, one other point, you guys addressed one of them already by putting 65% open, anything above 4 feet. But the other question is, on point 1, we put no solid fences above 4 feet along Corrales Road frontage. I'd like to see maybe some sort of setback, so somebody can't move their fence back 5 feet from the road and say that they think that they're within regulation. I don't know if we can define a distance from Corrales Road that has to be adhered to, because I also don't want people, if they're going to put a fence 50 feet back, to still have to follow the same rule as somebody who has one right on the road.
Well, this is what the COG is for. So they're going to take all these things under advisement and run it back past. Remember, we've been having regularly scheduled steering committee meetings and past P&Z. So, but it is complicated and there's a lot of moving parts. So I appreciate everybody's input, and we will continue to work on it.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know on the legal issues, we will be working with planning and Mr. Cog to address those legal concerns. There are several of them that are legitimate legal concerns that she raised, so we'll be working with them on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Audio. I appreciate it. All right. I think that is, I want to thank Peyton Showalter, who's been with us for the entire project very much. And also thank you, Ms. Borg, for presenting tonight. And I'm sure you are going to get more input from various counselors, and we want to make sure everybody's concerns are heard and considered. Thank you very much. So
Thank you.
you're very welcome. So we're going to move on to item number 4, which is consideration, action, and direction from the governing body to proceed on the Village of Corrales, MRGCD, and State Forestry Department invasive species clearing project work plan. I think I would like, I think the way I'd like to do it, I'm sure we have public comment on this. I would like to hear from Chief Martinez, and then we will go to public comment.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Can you hear me
Good
okay?
evening. Yes, absolutely.
So what I brought before you tonight is an amended version of what I presented at the last council meeting from the State Forestry Work Plan. We had a meeting with members of the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission on the 23rd per your direction to kind of discuss how this, originated and our plans. And it was myself, members of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy, and members of the Bosque Advisory Commission. I want to make note that there was no decision making, even though we had, members of the commission. We were just talking and brainstorming and trying to work together. There was a lot of good questions. I was provided with an email of a list of questions that I'm guessing from a majority of the Bosque Advisory Commissioners. And I felt we addressed every one of those questions in person. We took Yasmin, when I say we, Yasmin Najmi with the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy and myself. We took their suggestions and amended what you have before you as far as a work plan. So again, just to reemphasize, this was originally brought to you as a maintenance to reduce some of the fuel loading that we're seeing along the toe of the levee. And I did attach some photographs as far as tonight's presentation, and I'd be happy to explain the background of each photograph.
And I just want to make sure that I understand the focus of this item. You are really seeking direction from the council for them to be able to, for you to be able to proceed with this draft plan. It's not completed yet, is that correct? But you're seeking direction and approval from the council, not to a particular plan, but for the ability to go forward with this kind of work.
Yes, this plan is in draft. It's being reviewed at the State Forestry. I do apologize. Todd Haynes could not attend this meeting tonight. But the description, the project description of objectives, I think are well defined. As far as, the area and what to expect from work crews. And again, this funding is available, but the work may not be completed this year. I mean, we would like to start if we get direction, but at least it gives me some insight to, keep applying for funds to help us, with some of our maintenance obligations, as you know, that I've kind of assumed over the years on shaded fuel breaks and other areas in the Bosque.
The other thing is, Chief, the lower half of your face is super attractive, but if you'll switch your camera, we could see your whole face. I got a note. So can we see all of you? There you are. Thank you. Nope. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. And we will come back, but I do want to get to public comment. Aaron?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The first one of 4 on my list is Joan Morrison.
Go ahead, Ms. Morrison.
Good evening. Thank you. I hope you remember me from last time. I'm currently serving on the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission. I appreciate Chief's comments, and I have a statement here, but I'm going to modify it a little bit and simply make a few note of some of the items that are still of concern to our commission. One of the first ones is the way the objectives are stated. The original work plan presented to council on September 14th stated that the project objective, and this is a direct quote, is to cut all non-native trees out 20 feet from the toe of the levee, unquote. The current proposal states, again, quote, all trees and shrubs with the exception of Rio Grande cottonwood and Gooding's willow will be removed, end quote. This is confusing to us because it implies the total clearing of even native vegetation, including New Mexico olive, within the 10-foot area, which would have a greater negative effect on the birds. We're not sure if this was just a typo or an omission, but it's very concerning because New Mexico olive is a native shrub, is an important food and nesting resource for birds, and is not fire prone. To our knowledge, nobody has ever proposed native vegetation removal within the bosque before, so we might like some clarification on that. We talked also about Aloft Transects at that September 23rd meeting, but there wasn't really a resolution, although at that meeting, Chief Martinez was agreeable to working with CBAC members to flag and avoid these transects. The current proposal makes no mention of the transects, which are specific areas where research has been conducted for more than 18 years. The transects were funded and their numbers justified by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers because of the amount of good quality bird habitat within the bosque. Clearing the transects would destroy the habitat and compromise the research. So we'd like to have further discussion on that issue. Additionally, no justification is given for the need to completely clear the 10-foot strip out from the toe along the entire length of the levee. This was not part of the original proposal, but it was brought up sort of, again, unexpectedly at the meeting on the 23rd. In its over 20 years of existence, the levee has never required such vegetation clearance despite multiple inspections. And maintenance has always occurred from the levee road on the top. So we don't quite understand the need now for complete clearing out from the toe to that 10 feet. Again, during the September 23rd meeting, Chief Martinez indicated that limited fire access pathways into the bosque could be cleared rather than clearing along the entire length of the levee. So we believe that non-native vegetation within the 10-foot should be cleared only at these points where access is needed, as recommended by the chief, into the bosque for fire equipment and personnel. And we don't see the need for that complete clearing. Additionally, large-scale clearing of vegetation along the levee sides and out 10 to 20 feet from the toe will encourage people to make new pathways down the levee sides, causing even more subsidence and erosion. And I don't think that's anything anybody wants to have happen. The new proposal also did treat the excess amount of dead and down wood along the levee toe and in the areas there that have been left from former clearing projects. This material constitutes a large and dangerous fuel load. The new proposal makes some mention about treating that material. We don't really understand what that means and would like some clarification on that. We support the idea that all cut trees and other dead and down material generated by this project and from previous projects within that 20-foot area simply be removed out of the bosque completely. If left, this material only adds to the already large fuel load, increasing fire risk. Additionally, we know that any clearing or thinning work has to be completed by the start of songbird migratory nesting season, April 15th. However, this is something that hadn't come up before, but we recognize that some hawks and owls are known to nest in the bosque, and they may begin nesting as early as February or March. If this work is to move forward, these nests must be identified and appropriate buffers designated, because disturbance or destruction of the nests resulting from project work would actually be a violation of the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act. We really don't want to be known as the village that cut down prime bosque habitat, I think. So I would like to have the opportunity to additionally collaborate on this project and hope that the chief and the Conservancy are willing to work with us to be able to carry out these activities. If you are inclined to accept this proposed work plan, council members, I request that you do so only with commitment to assign and be accountable for the following modifications. Leave all native New Mexico olive untouched within the entire 20-foot from the levee toe. The hawks aloft transect should be left untouched by the project. Avoid complete clearing of the entire 10-foot strip along the entire length of the levee, but only where is needed, as identified intervals where access into the bosque is required for fire equipment and personnel. And remove all cut trees and other dead and down wood generated by the project and other projects within the 20-foot area and remove it out of the bosque. Again, thank you for your time, and the CBAC looks forward to continuing to collaborate with the parties on developing this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morrison. Who's up next, Aaron?
Yes, Madam Mayor, the next on my list is Mary Chappelle.
Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Mary Chappelle. I'm a Corrales resident residing at 26 Don Tomas. Some of this is similar to what Dr. Morrison just reported to you, which is the concern about not accepting from the clearing New Mexico olive. That may be an oversight. If it needs to be, if it is, it needs to be changed. And if it's not an oversight, it needs to be changed. We should not be removing native plants. And that was not something in the original proposal. Both the initial report and the revised proposal state the work will take place outside the migratory bird breeding season. However, they only have referred to the migratory songbird breeding season, which begins in April and fails to recognize or give consideration to the breeding season for raptors, including great horned owl and Swainson hawks, which are covered by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Those larger birds begin even as early as January or February, and historically there have been nests located in the trees within the toe of the levee or immediately adjacent to the toe. So under the act, care has to be taken for any work that would have an impact in their nesting area. An independent professional experienced in locating nests must be retained to do a nest search before any work is done in a given area. Locating nests is a specialized skill. It is not a skill held by MRGCD or state forestry management. And it often requires work near dark, especially for the great horned owls. Regardless of the federal law, in order to keep the bosque a nature preserve, this issue must be addressed. And that seems to me that the nest search has to be a cost that is included in this project. It was my understanding that the existing transects used by Aloft for its research, and as Dr. Morrison said, research that spanned 18 years would not be interfered with this project. But no mention is made in this amended proposal. Both MRGCD and the fire department are aware of the transects, and there was some discussion about them on our September 20th meeting. If specific locations are needed, that can be addressed and taken care of to point those out. Finally, on the Russian olives, they do provide substantial habitat and food source for the wildlife in our bosque. It serves a purpose whether it is native or not. The proposal to leave, quote, some, end quote, Russian olives is very vague and difficult to measure. An incremental approach to access for fire would work better. Preserving Russian olives helps to preserve our bird population. I want to point out it's not just that birds can be a source of pleasure to people and bring birding money to Corrales. It's that they also serve an important role as pollinators and help control rodents and insects, both of which could be detrimental to crops. The bottom line is we don't want to see Corrales be the village that treated its bosque so as to negatively impact wildlife, especially at this time when concerns over extinction have been raised. Rather, I believe and I would hope that Corrales would prefer to have a vibrant bosque that can be enjoyed and used by many humans and animals.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Aaron?
Next on my list is Joan Hashimoto.
Please go ahead, Joan.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to thank the council for making sure that CBAC is in the loop in this decision-making process relating to the bosque. The process for this proposal has been difficult. In a very short time, we did a study of vegetation along the levee toe, made recommendations and sent the report with recommendations to you and all stakeholders 1 week ago. I have some comments on that response. Fire risk is important, but MRGCD and others talk of the balance between fire risk and wildlife habitat management, particularly in our fragile nature preserve. The village has an exceptional fire department, but no biologists. Besides having some dedicated users of the bosque, CBAC has members former members, and contacts with expertise in biology, ecology, ornithology, hydrology, and life sciences. We can help the village in those areas, and in fact, that is part of our charge. This levee toe thinning project will cut a huge number of living trees and destroy valuable habitat, while a massive deadened down wood fuel load problem exists and indeed gets larger every year with cottonwoods auto pruning and trees dying. I understand regulations. Maintaining the levee is important. Ever since the current levee was constructed over 20 years ago, the east slope has been maintained from the levee road. Although the levee toe is not in strict compliance with regulations, which has been the case and well known since its construction, the USACE, which has done the levee inspections, has said that the toe vegetation noncompliance would not affect future levee eligibility for federal funding. Some points. What is newly cut should be removed. That's not mentioned in the proposal, but perhaps by mistake. Number 2, New Mexico olive is uniquely native, is known by indigenous peoples as ironwood for its hardness. Let's not be the village known as the one that cut native trees. The research transects, which were funded by the USACE, are part of almost 20 years ongoing study by Hawks Aloft of birds in the bosque over weather, climate, river, and other changes. It's important to preserve the transects. Do thinning where it's indicated, not monolithic clearing and thinning. We're happy to work with the fire department and state forestry for this project. Thanks for your considerations.
Thank you very much, Joan. Appreciate your comments. Aaron?
And the last person I have on my list is Janet Ruth.
Thank you. Janet, there you are.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak at this. Some of you know me, a lot of new faces that I see there on the council. My name is Janet Ruth. I'm a Coreylanes. I live at 105 Mission Ridge Road. I'm a retired research ornithologist and a former member of the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission. So I try to keep my fingers in the pies and understand what's going on in the bosque. And I had actually provided, comments and ideas to CBAC through Joan, assuming that was the appropriate venue through which projects like this would be reviewed with advice to council. But wanted to speak to a few things today, and a lot of it has already been repeated, has already been said by the previous speakers, and so I'm not going to try to repeat everything, but a few things do bear repeating. I've had a chance to look at the most recent revision that I think was released on last Friday, the 8th or something like that, and sort of look at the previous one. So I'm primarily going to speak to you from my experience and knowledge as a biologist, a field ecologist, and ornithologist. But I did want to start by saying that I understand the fire department and the villages need to be able to move their equipment around in the bosque to provide fire, to reduce fire hazards and make us all safe. And I understand that there's always a balance involved with looking at the missions of the fire department and the missions of maintaining our Corrales Bosque Preserve, and for which, by the way, I was the person who nominated the Corrales Bosque the Corrales Bosque Preserve to be an important bird area approved by the New Mexico Audubon Society. So it holds a dear place in my heart. But having said that I understand this, I also wanted to say, personally, from my perspective as a biologist, I have no problems with any of the removal of 3 of the 4 species of non-native trees. Have at it with the tree of heaven, the Siberian elm, and the, what's the other one? I lost my place in my list. But I do have some concerns about, as others have mentioned, about Russian olive. And I first wanted to recognize that in the revisions that came out last Friday, there have been a few improvements that I was really pleased to see. One of them was to allow for the retention of some Russian olives. They do, as others suggested, provide a lot of wildlife winter food resources. I can give you one simple example. I used to do regular walks from the north end of the siphon to the Harvey Jones Channel. And on one day, one winter, I walked and I counted in that stretch of the bosque probably 700 cedar waxwings and somewhere between 300 and 400 American robins, and all of them were feeding on either Russian olive, which is exotic, and New Mexico olive, which is native. So it's a really important winter food source. And I could give you other examples, but that's not for this time. Let's see, what else do I want to say? So I am concerned, as was mentioned elsewhere, that the proposal includes the entire stretch of the interface between the levee and the bosque from Alameda all the way to the siphon. And from my experience, when I was on the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission, and we worked regularly with Anthony and other members of the fire department, and I was on the board while we were working on the shaded fuel breaks. And that was certainly also a controversial issue, but we came to a lot of agreements. And one of the things we agreed on was that we could agree on some places, the key places where access needed to be provided and where shaded fuel breaks, either natural or created, needed to be. And that way we did not have to do something for the entire length of the bosque. And I think the argument for doing something like that, as opposed to broad brush from one end to the other, is a good approach. Yeah, let's see. Oh, and the other thing that was added, which I was pleased to see, was the reference to the retention of some snags. As I think this was something that hadn't been mentioned by others so far today, and in that standing dead trees or trees with dead branches can provide valuable wildlife habitat for cavity nesting species and for foragers like woodpeckers who are looking for food under old dead bark. And so I was pleased to see that there was some language in this new version that says that some of those should be maintained for wildlife. I personally would prefer that the language said something like snags and cavities would be retained except if they pose a particular hazard, as opposed to just requiring a minimum of a certain number per acre. But nevertheless, I was pleased to see that was included. The places where I have had continuing concern have been mentioned to some extent. One is the divisions between the treatment for the first 10 feet from the toe of the levee and then the next 10 to 20 feet. Before, it was all discussed in the 20 feet. And I'm concerned, as others are, by the fact that the language says now that the only trees and shrubs to be retained in that first 10 feet are cottonwoods and Gooding's willows. And as others have suggested, that means that without revision in the language, that would mean that within that first 10 feet, native New Mexican olives and other native trees that are not as common, I don't know, like buffalo berry and some other things like that, could be removed. And it would pretty much mean that with that combined with the removal of all of the dead and down would mean that there was no understory at all in that 10 feet. And one of my observations about that, excuse me, is that by doing that, especially if it was done the entire length of the bosque, is creating really, really unnatural kind of habitat. in any quote unquote natural or more natural forest, the edge between two habitat types, between the forest and frequently more open habitat, that edge tends to have the thickest shrub component of anywhere, much thicker than even in the middle of the forest. And that is one of the most diverse and valuable places in forests. And so by completely removing understory for that 10 feet, and then, some beyond that, that's a bit of a concern to me as an ecologist, that really creates a very unnatural kind of structure. I'm looking at my notes here because I don't have a very good memory for which things I wanted to say.
And Miss Ruth,
How are we doing on time?
If I could just ask you to wrap up here in the next minute or so, I would
You bet.
appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure enough. I think I've covered a lot of my concerns. There's some language in number 2 that it's just confusing. I used to work for a congressman, and I know that legislative language can be confounding. There's a big long sentence that has to do with native trees that are dead, that might have dead limbs, that could fall, that could cause damage, and it's an and or sort of thing, and it's hard to tell whether all of those things have to apply before a native tree can be cut or not. I couldn't figure it out. And then finally, I just had a couple of questions. I was glad to see the mention of Hawks and Loft's Transects, because they're extremely valuable, and changing the habitat adds another variable to things that they've been studying for almost 20 years. It's really important. I was confused by the language that had to do with mulch. I understand that in general, the policy seemed to be that you wanted to get rid of the mulch, and that's not a bad thing. I was confused by this statement that said that if mulch was left there, it should only be left 5 feet or something outside of the drip line of trees. And I had no idea what that meant or why that would be, since the only use of mulch I could ever think of was to maintain soil moisture, and you would want to do that under the trees. I don't know if it's considered a fire hazard. Either way, it doesn't seem like a very useful approach. And
Thank you.
Would go on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your comments. At this point, Chief, would you like to respond, or would you like to have, I know Yasmin is here with us too.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. That's a lot to respond to. I think I'll let Yasmin, if she can, maybe discuss some of the things pertaining to MRDCD about the 10-foot, the transects, and the importance of the levy and its structure. And then maybe I can kind of in closing follow up on some of the other stuff.
I did want to ask you, what percentage of the Bosque is going to be affected by this project?
If my math is right, it's roughly 3%.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Yasmin, would you like to weigh in and tell everybody where you're from?
Sure, Mayor. Thank you very much. My name is
welcome.
Yasmin Majmi. I'm a planner at the Rio Grande Conservancy District and have been with the district for many years and worked with several Bosque commissions. I appreciate the comments tonight. I just wanted to provide some clarification on some of what was said. As Chief Martinez mentioned, we did go out to the site with about 4 to 5 members of the CBAC. We did have a very open discussion about the Conservancy District's needs for access to the toe of the levee, which is where the 10 feet zone comes from. Currently, there's a lot of vegetation there. We're out of compliance. We don't have any access for equipment to get in and do repairs on the riverside toe of the levee. So the purpose of the project is twofold. That was made clear to everybody. One is to allow a small zone of access for the Conservancy District to get in and properly maintain the levee on the riverside toe. And the other was to provide a zone of safety for emergency response so that Chief Martinez, when there is a fire, can safely get in and get through to fight fires in the interior parts of the Bosque. And also to make sure we don't have huge flame lengths right up against the levee, which would prevent any emergency access at all, really, from being able to take place. So, our approach is we agreed to leave the larger trees like cottonwoods and black willows. The issue with the shrubs such as Russian olive, tamarisk, even New Mexico olive, leaving that in that 10-foot zone is that there's so much of it that it appreciably doesn't buy us any access to leave those there. So with the 10 to 20-foot zone out, we agreed to leave all the natives and also to selectively leave Russian olives for wildlife. And that would be in places where, you know, the chief felt the trees were healthy, that they were safe to retain them, and they didn't appreciably, you know, cause a huge fire risk, and including a fire risk to the native trees that are around it. So there were several comments made about the transects that are in the Corrales Bosque. Those bird and vegetation transects were established, some cases more recently, in many cases many years ago. They exist throughout the Conservancy District and the Middle Rio Grande and 4 counties. Corrales happens to have a very high number of transects for the area of the Bosque, which in my estimation is 600 or 700 acres. Am I right about that, Chief? And Joan?
Roughly.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Yeah, 650. Okay, so by my estimation, there's about 20 of those transects, which are 122 meters by 800 meters in length. In comparison, in the Albuquerque Bosque, we have 4,300 acres in the Rio Grande Valley State Park, and we have the same 20 transects for that area. So, you know, when you do the math, and it just, you know, just as a side note, we've always tried to protect the transects as much as possible when we've done projects, but these transects have already been affected by projects in Corrales. They coincide with the shaded fuel breaks. They've been impacted by the Corps' bosque restoration projects. In some cases, they've been established by those projects. So, you know, the issue that we have with saying that we're not going to touch those transects is that they comprise, there's 6 of them along the levee. They comprise about 3 out of the 6 miles, 6 or 7 miles north to south of the Corrales levee. And they comprise in area about 75% of the entire Corrales Bosque. So that's an enormous amount of land. And, you know, I don't think it's realistic to say that we just, you know, we can't do anything in 75% of the Corrales Bosque because of the transects. And I think Aloft also knows that. So while we certainly want to minimize our impacts to those, it's not realistic with some of the maintenance responsibilities we have, particularly for the levee, to say that, you know, we're not going to touch them. So this was a compromise. It was a compromise presented to Aloft as well. And I mean, I think it's reasonable. It's about, you know, what's 20 feet? I mean, the 10-foot zone is about 3 meters out of 122 meter width of a transect. So it's not, we're not talking about a lot of land. And certainly, you know, we want to respect the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and certainly we want to respect any nesting that may be occurring in the winter, and avoid any trees that we can see would have nesting. And if we, you know, if we need to try to get somebody in to do some surveying, we can do that too. And we're, you know, we're open to, you know, and Chief Martinez can flag some trees to leave in the Russian olives. You know, we're certainly open to the Bosque Commission coming and taking a look and seeing, you know, what is being proposed to be left there in that 20-foot zone.
Thank you. I appreciate your remarks. Chief Martinez?
Mayor, Council, thank you. I'll try to address some of these things that were brought up. The photographs that you have, I used a piece of fire hose, and every foot I, you know, color coded it white and blue, just to kind of give, you know, kind of an idea of 20 feet in the bosque. And some of the photographs that I did pick, you can see some of it is just naturally already open. So that's very minimal work. My main focus on this, and I totally agree with all the comments about the dead firewood. I just logistically trying to get volunteers to remove this, and then on Saturdays, a few firewood pickups, just too much fuel load. And so this funding will help me hire someone to help get rid of all this wood that has been sitting there, and any future wood that we would produce. So that hopefully I covered the firewood aspect, and I totally agree it's a fire hazard and we want to remove it. Yasmin covered the transects. I want to make it clear other projects that we have done in the Bosque with similar funding sources, hiring firefighters to do the work. Again, they'll be supervised by me. And every project we do our due diligence, even outside of the nesting season, to double check everything we do before we start. So if there's any sort of question that, because we all know that the times are changing, it's getting hotter earlier. And so that's always been a concern for us. And so we do that. And we're gonna follow the nesting season and the dates. And we made that very clear to Conservancy as well. And they're gonna assist me in any sort of expertise. If we have a question, we'll stop work, and then before we proceed, make sure that it's clear.
So Chief, am I correct, though, that this is still a work in progress, that you are still working on this plan?
Yes, Mayor, this is a work in progress, but we feel that we've under the project description objectives, we feel very confident we covered pretty much what we're going to do, how we're going to proceed, and working with the Bosque Advisory Commission. And I also want to clarify, the 20 feet is something that I originally came up with, and that's basically going back to some of our firefighting tactics when we're safety zones. If there's any sort of flames or flame lengths, 10-foot flame lengths, you need to have like a 40-foot safety zone. So we're trying to reduce the fuel load along the levee. And then I already cut that number in half because we're not going to be able to get up to 40 feet, even though on one of my pictures, I included approximately how wide the levee road is. It's roughly 16 feet. So.
Okay, thank you. Counselors, do you have something that you would like to ask either Yasmin or the chief, or a comment you would like to make? Councilor Lucero?
Thank you, Mayor. Am I unmuted?
Yes,
Thank
you are.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I just have kind of more of a comment, maybe a question at the end, and I want to thank the Corrales Bosque Commission for coming out and speaking to us tonight. I think what I want to just confirm to myself is I want to make sure it's understood that what we want to do here is a maintenance project, and I believe I'm correct in that, Chief. And if I'm somewhere wrong, Chief, please correct me. But this is a maintenance project that has to be done to protect the health, the safety, and the well-being of our bosque and our public safety. I believe that the chief has partnered with some of the best people, including the Corrales Bosque Commission, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy, the Forestry Division, the Army Corps of Engineers. I have 100% confidence that the chief will perform this project right. I don't believe that there is no more steward of this bosque than our chief, our fire chief. I can tell you, I'm a little bit frustrated because I know time is of the essence in projects such as these, when we're trying to protect so many things. Time is of the essence, and I think I'm a little frustrated that we haven't come to a resolution yet. So I would like for us to move forward with this. I have the utmost confidence in the chief that he will consult all the people that have a stake in this game, including the Corrales Bosque Commission, the state forestry. I believe that will happen, and I would like to see this project move forward. So that's kind of all I wanted to say. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucero. Yes, Councilor Murray?
Oh, thank you, Mayor, councilors, and Chief. Excuse my ignorance for some things, but define the toe. What is the toe area? Is that the slope coming off of the road?
Councilor Murray, Mayor, the toe is at the Riverside toe or the east side, either one. But it's where the bank of the toe where the bank of the levee comes down and meets to where it just kind of goes horizontal into the bosque.
Okay.
Yasmin, that sound about right?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, then my other question is, given that we were sent a email by the Corrales Bosque group, the 4 items they were talking about, what would be the impact on your plan if you could do all 4 of these things that they're asking?
Councilor Murray, Mayor, I guess there was a lot of discussion. I'm trying to figure out
Well, one is to leave the New Mexico olive. The other one's remove all cut dead down. Obviously, that's I think that's a given. Do not clear the entire 10-foot strip along the entire length of the levee. And then the Aloft transect, I guess, is the 4th. These are the 4 major items I took away from this email.
Yes, so
Councilor Murray, I'm sorry. The issue.
Is this a counselor? Oh, is this Yasmin?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just to speak to that 10-foot zone, the issue is that leaving the shrubs, including the New Mexico olive, which we would normally leave. I mean, we don't normally cut natives out of the bosque in a regular bosque restoration type of project. This is a levee maintenance project. The issue with leaving those shrubs along the levee is that they're very dense, very numerous. It really doesn't buy us adequate access to the levee. Like the bigger trees like cottonwoods, we can kind of get around those with equipment. But shrubs and the dense shrubs, whether they be New Mexico olive or Russian olive, we can't get around it. And I'm trying to remember the other question.
There was one about the transects.
Yeah, and the same thing with the transects, as I mentioned. The length of the transects, 6 transects, which are directly along the levee, is 3 out of the 6 miles of the Corrales Bosque. So again, leaving those completely untouched doesn't buy us adequate access, maintenance access to the levee.
And also, I think the question was about doing the entire length of the levee.
Right. And again, it's because, we need access to maintain the levee as a facility. We can't just leave some areas alone and open up other areas. Like it doesn't really help us. I mean, that's a strategy you could use maybe for fire management. It's not really a strategy you can use for, maintaining the levee.
Okay, thank you. Any other counselors have something they would like to say before we see what we want to do here? Yes, Councilor Burkett.
I just have a for my information question because I don't know about as much about this as I should. Could somebody define to me these transects and what responsibilities we have, if any, or are they just something that are in place for research purposes and there's really no formal protection of them?
Yasmin, you want to take that one?
Sure. There is no formal protection of the transects. I think it's understood that they were set up with good intention, and that was to do long-term monitoring of vegetation changes in the bosque. I think land managers have generally honored that and tried to keep them as much as possible intact, but that's not always possible. Sometimes they burn in a fire. Sometimes we've had necessary projects to do that have impacted them. So no, they're not something that's necessarily managed by any one party, except that when there has been money available, there have been crews that have done monitoring, like the Aloft, monitored the vegetation and monitored bird use of those transects. Unless the village is, taken a specific role, maybe you all have as part of the preserve.
Councilor Murray. Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Councilor. Maybe this is better. This question might be better directed towards the Corrales Bosque Authority. But from what they're proposing, how much habitat are we going to lose if the maintenance agreement is adhered to and out of the entire bosque? I mean, are we really talking about a huge loss of habitat? Or...
I think Councilor that Chief Martinez explained what percentage of the bosque this would affect. Is that correct, Chief? Do I have that?
Total?
Chief?
Mayor, Councilor Murray, yeah, roughly 3%. But as far as habitat questions, I think Yasmin might be better at answering that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you a total in terms of number of trees. You know, what was it, Anthony, about 14 acres total
It's roughly 20 acres. It's a
or
little,
20 acres? Okay.
we're going to do the, you know, the feathering into the shaded field breaks and take the opportunity to re-clean those up. So.
Yeah. So you have to consider, you know, some areas have more dense shrubs, some don't. Like Anthony mentioned, some are more open. Some have a lot of dead wood and dead trees, which could be cleaned up. You know, I can't give you an exact amount, but the total acreage, when you consider the total acreage of the Corrales Bosque, I think is fairly small.
Any other counselors wish to? Yes, Counselor Knight?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the timelines for these. So say if it's not done come spring, then you will stop and then redo it maybe next fall, because there is some timelines that people were talking about as far as migration and things like that. Or do you see it being completed by, like, say, the beginning of March?
Councilor Mayor, yes, we're going to follow the federal, you know, Migratory Bird Act, which is April 15th through August 15th. We can't do any work. So, you know, any work that we do start, we have up until April 15th, then we'll stop. And then I'm going to do my best to seek funds to help us with some of these maintenance projects, you know, the following year. This is kind of a reoccurring type deal. It's a lot of work to be done. I know that there was some question about priorities and where I'm going to start. That's all situation dependent based on available crews, you know. But one of my priorities is trying to get rid of some of this dead and down and the firewood that has been accumulated that we haven't had any other option to get rid of.
Thank you. Counselor Parker?
Mayor, councilors,
Oh dear. Counselor Parker, I'm afraid. You want to, could you call us in on your phone so that we can, because I can assure you, we're not getting your question right now.
It sounds like there's a large number of these Transects by density compared.
Yes, it does sound like there's I got you. You wanted to confirmation that there were a large number of Transects? Oops.
Madam Mayor, it looks like he dropped out here, so hopefully he'll be joining in back in via phone.
Okay, or, you know, he's welcome to, maybe he could, you know, write in or text in so that we could consider his question. I mean, this has been a robust discussion and we've gotten a lot of input. I do think at this point, the fire department is really asking for direction from the governing body to go ahead and be able to proceed on continuing to work on this plan. That's really what this is about. Oh, are you back, Tyson? Okay.
Not yet, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We'll just wait another, but I would definitely take a motion on that and then we'll see. But I would love to hear from Counselor Parker. And I'm sure he would love to be heard.
While we're waiting on him, can I ask one very brief question?
Of course.
It appears that the greatest level of concern is with the edge habitat. Is there any compromise, Yasmin or Chief, that we can preserve at least pieces of that edge habitat? I don't have a percentage to suggest, but I mean, is there at least gaps where we could look at places of preserving that?
Well, Counselor Burkett, you know, my feeling is with the work plan, with dividing the 20 feet into 0 to 10 and 10 to 20, with 10 to 20 being we retain all natives. all shrubs, including New Mexico olive, and then some Russian olives. That is retaining some of the edge habitat. We also agreed to retain the trees and work around them along the levee, which, is still an issue for us. But, if we're going to get into, retaining a bunch of shrubs and other things, I'm not sure how well that's gonna work.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Burkett?
It does, and I share Councilor Lucero's thoughts that Chief Martinez is going to do everything in his possibility to preserve this bosque as best he can while still meeting his needs. So, assuming that, I agree with Councilor Lucero that this probably needs to get done.
Okay, I would entertain a motion. Again, I'm going to ask one more time if Councilor Parker has rejoined us.
Yeah, Mayor Rowe, councilors, I apologize for my
There you
disturbance of the internet bug. It got me. Anyway, my question was, it seems like we have a larger density of these transects in other regions. I'm not sure if that's by design or if it was just allowed more here than in other areas. But I'm curious if we are going to have to manipulate them for this project on there, if there are some that are more critical than others, if those can be identified and tried to be left unmolested, if that's possible.
Yasmin, Chief Martinez, any response? Would that be-
Counselor, I can certainly talk to Trevor Fetz at Aloft and ask him, about that. He did not express that to me that any were, the ones that are of, are involved in this project are the ones along the drain. There's many others that are not along the drain. I'm
Okay,
sorry, along
okay,
the
so
levee, along the levee itself, but I can ask him that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Do I have a motion at this point?
I'll move, Mayor.
Yes, all right. Councilor Lucero is moving that we go ahead and direct the chief to proceed with this work plan. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Waldman. All right, I'm going to take a roll call vote on this. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move into new business. As you may be aware, there will be an election in March of 2022. And one of the first steps that we need to do is have a resolution to notify the Secretary of State of all municipal officer positions that will be filled at the next municipal office election in March of 2022. And the resolution reads that the offices up for election will be mayor for a 4-year term, councilor from District 1 for a 4-year term, councilor for District 3 for a 4-year term, and councilor for District 4 for a 4-year term. Do I have a motion?
So move, Mayor.
All right, I had a motion from Councilor Murray, a second from Councilor Knight. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move down to L, which is announcements and future agenda items. I know that I believe we are going to see fairly quickly in the next meeting a personnel code update. That hasn't been done since the 90s. As you can imagine, we might need a few things. Also, we have another, I think the attorneys have been working on something to fortify our appellate procedures, make sure that we're protecting ourselves and appellants to the best of our ability. I don't know, Mr. Curry, do you have any idea about the, I know you've been working on personnel pay ranges and descriptions, et cetera. When do you think that might come before us?
We hope to have that either at the next meeting or the following meeting after the personnel issues.
Okay, that's terrific. And I know many more things will probably definitely come up. I thought that you would all want to know that although I don't have the paperwork finished, so I can't present the person, we have offered the village clerk position to someone that I think all appearances are that we're really going to enjoy having this person on board. And I will be presenting that for approval at the next council meeting on the 26th. Anything else? Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. I would like two things put on the agenda for next time. The first one is a resolution of intent that no action is to be taken by the village regarding cannabis applications licensing until a subsequent cannabis ordinance is acted on. And then two, to post and publish an ordinance reestablishing sections 2 and 3 of ordinance 1802, banning cannabis from the A1, A2 except for personal use. And I have emailed our attorneys my intent about this, and I'll work with them to get those two things on the agenda.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. All right, anything else? All right, I would actually take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, got a lot of agreement on that one. All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much.
I'm raising my hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you're raising your hand. I can see that. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.